The history of humanity is often told as a brilliant parade of victories, revolutions, and world-changing inventions. In schoolbooks, we read about those who discovered the wheel, electricity, or the internet. However, there is another side to the coin, a dark, silent, and incredibly expensive side. Today, in the Vassaf Files dossier, we enter history's backyard, the technology graveyard. This is the resting place of projects that were once claimed to change the future, graced the covers of magazines, had investors sleeping at their doors, but ultimately turned into massive voids. When we adjust the total cost of the 20 projects we will examine today to today's money with inflation, the figure reaches a dimension that the human brain struggles to comprehend. Approximately $6 trillion. Yes, you heard that right. $6 trillion. With this money, we could have ended world hunger multiple times, established a fully equipped colony on Mars, or cleaned the entire ocean of plastic. But what did we do? We buried this money in juicers that didn't work, glasses no one wanted to wear, planes that never flew, and virtual universes where no one lived. Of course, from the ashes of these wrecks I am about to tell you about, the seeds of some technologies we use today have sprouted. We can say that without the Apple Newton, there would be no iPhone. And without the Segway, today's electric scooter revolution would not have happened. But do these small gains justify the massive fortunes spent and humanity's hubris? Or are these the trillion-dollar bills cut to us by our greed and fear of missing out on the next big thing? You decide. Now fasten your seatbelts, because we are starting to watch how billions of dollars were incinerated. 1. Juicero, the $120 million juice joke. We begin our list with perhaps the funniest example of Silicon Valley's hubris and detachment from reality. Juicero. Released in 2016, this device was a juice press costing a whopping $400. But it wasn't an ordinary juicer. It had a Wi-Fi connection, read QR codes, and only worked with special fruit packs sold by the company. Investors called it the Tesla of juice and poured $120 million into the project. This was supposed to be the kitchen of the future. Until one day, two journalists from Bloomberg performed a simple experiment. They took Juicero's expensive packs and squeezed them with just their hands, without using the device. The result was shocking. The human hand squeezed juice faster and more efficiently than this $400 machine loaded with tons of technology and Wi-Fi. This fiasco turned into the biggest laughingstock in internet history. The company had to recall all devices and went bankrupt within 16 months. Juicero taught us a $120 million lesson that technology is not the solution to every problem, and sometimes the best technology is our own hands. 2. Amazon Fire Phone. Jeff Bezos' $170 million ego. Today, Amazon is one of the world's largest companies. However, in 2014, founder Jeff Bezos' ambition got ahead of his logic. Amazon decided to build a device to finish off Apple and Samsung in the smartphone market, the Fire Phone. The biggest trick of this phone was 4 front cameras that provided a feature called dynamic perspective, making the screen look three-dimensional to you. Bezos thought people would love this feature, but he forgot one thing. People didn't want 3D effects on their phones. They wanted good apps and ease of use. The Fire Phone was so expensive and full of such unnecessary features that consumers hated it. Even basic apps like Google Maps or YouTube didn't work properly on the device. The result was a total disaster. Amazon had to dispose of warehouses full of unsold phones for $10 each. This adventure cost the company a $170 million loss, and Amazon gave up on its love of producing phones forever. 3. Litro camera. The $200 million focus problem. Emerging with the claim of revolutionizing photography, Litro had a miraculous technology on paper. Thanks to light field technology, you could change the focus point after taking the photo. So the blurry photo problem would be history. The tech press went crazy, investors lined up, and $200 million flowed into the company. However, when the product hit the market, the bitter truth slapped them in the face. Litro cameras were oddly shaped, not ergonomic, had poor quality screens, and most importantly, the photos they took had massive file sizes. Rather than paying thousands of dollars to carry this bulky device, people continued to take perfectly good photos with the smartphones in their pockets. Litro was an example of a solution looking for a problem. No one was desperate to focus after taking the photo. The company went under, its patents were sold to Google, and this wonderful technology was shelved in the dusty pages of history because it wasn't practical. 4. Segway. The headache of sidewalks, not cities. In 2001, when legendary inventor Dean Kamen introduced the Segway, the world shook. Steve Jobs said it would be an even bigger invention than the personal computer. The claim was that the Segway would change the design of cities, make cars unnecessary, and bury walking in history. Investors poured hundreds of millions of dollars into this dream. However, when the Segway came out, no one knew where to put it. If it went on the road, cars hit it. If it went on the sidewalk, it hit pedestrians. Also, the price was so high that ordinary people couldn't even get near it. The device that was said to change the world eventually turned to an uncool toy used only by mall security guards and tourist groups. The Segway company changed hands multiple times and eventually went out of production. Still, let's give credit where it's due. The balance technology developed by Segway laid the foundation for today's electric scooter craze and wheelchairs. But compared to the money spent and the expectation, the result was a complete disappointment. 5. Apple Newton, a fiasco far ahead of its time. Developed during the period when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, Newton was the world's first true PDA, or personal digital assistant. When it was released in 1993, it was seen as the ancestor of today's iPad. It had a touch screen and recognized handwriting. At least that was the claim. However, Newton's handwriting recognition feature was so bad that it became a subject of mockery even in the Simpsons cartoon. Interpreting "beat up Martin" as "eat up Martha" finished the device's reputation. Also, its price was around $1,500 in today's money. The device was bulky. Its batteries drained quickly, and its capabilities were limited in a world without the internet. One of the first things Steve Jobs did when he returned to Apple was to pull the plug on Newton. The project closed with a $500 million loss. However, the engineers working on Newton and the developed ARM processor architecture would enable the birth of the iPhone and iPad years later. So this was not an expensive mistake, but perhaps a very expensive preparation period. 6. Microsoft Zune, a brown $1 billion. In the mid-2000s, Apple was dominating the music world with the iPod. Microsoft decided to join this party late and released the Zune as the iPod killer. Actually, technically, the Zune wasn't a bad device. Its interface was stylish and the sound quality was good. However, the marketing mistakes Microsoft made were a lesson in themselves. The device came out exactly 5 years after the iPod, meaning the train had already left the station. Moreover, Microsoft chose brown as the launch color of the device. Yes, a brown music player. People mocked it, calling it a turd-colored iPod. Zune never caught the cool image of the iPod. Microsoft spent billions of dollars for the sake of this stubbornness, organized advertising campaigns. But its market share never exceeded single digits. Finally, Microsoft gave up and wiped the Zune brand from history. This project left a $1 billion wreck as living proof of the saying, "too little, too late" in the tech world. 7. Quibi, Hollywood's $1.75 billion hubris. In 2020, Hollywood giants like Jeffrey Katzenberg and tech CEOs like Meg Whitman came together and thought they had invented the future of television. The idea was this: Quibi. Coming from Quick Bites, this name would offer 10-minute, Hollywood-quality series that could only be watched on mobile phones. Directors like Spielberg were involved in the project, and a total of $1.75 billion was raised from investors. However, Quibi signed the worst timing in tech history. When the app was released, the world had entered a pandemic. Everyone was at home. No one was on the bus or subway. Why would people watch a series on a tiny phone screen when they could watch Netflix on their massive 4K televisions at home? Moreover, Quibi had even forbidden casting content to TV. Users gave a slap-like answer to this hubris. No one subscribed. Quibi went bankrupt just 6 months after its launch. $1.75 billion evaporated in just 180 days. This meant burning $110 per second. 8. Magic Leap, $3.5 billion of eye candy. We end the first part of our list with a masterpiece of mystery and exaggeration. Magic Leap. In the 2010s, a video started circulating on the internet, a giant whale leaping out of a gymnasium floor and diving back into the water. Everyone said, "This is it, the augmented reality revolution begins." Google, Alibaba, Saudi Arabian funds, everyone showered money on this company. The company hid the product for years, just said it was magical, and raised exactly $3.5 billion in investment. Secrecy was so high in their offices that even employees didn't fully know what they were doing. After years of waiting, when the product, Magic Leap 1, was released, it was a huge disappointment. That magical pair of glasses was connected to a bulky helmet worn on the head. The field of view was very narrow, and it turned out that the famous whale video was actually a computer effect, not the actual view from the glasses. Magic Leap failed completely in the consumer market. Now it is trying to survive by only selling to corporate companies, but the return on that $3.5 billion spent was never received. 9. Iridium. $5 billion of silence from space. In the late 90s, mobile phones didn't have reception everywhere yet. Motorola and a group of investors came up with a crazy idea to solve this problem from the root: the Iridium project. The plan was to surround the world with 66 low-orbit satellites and establish a phone network that worked everywhere from the poles to the middle of the oceans. From an engineering standpoint, this was a miracle. Rockets were fired, satellites were placed, and exactly $5 billion was spent. But when the system went live in 1998, the terrible truth was revealed. Iridium phones were as big as a brick, sold for an exorbitant price like $3,000, and worst of all, they didn't work inside buildings. You had to go out into the open air to see the satellite. Whereas at that time, GSM operators had rapidly installed base stations, shrunk phones, and made them cheaper. Iridium had completely misread the market realities. The company went bankrupt just 9 months after entering service. This was one of the fastest and most expensive collapses in tech history. 10. Windows Phone and Nokia. How did two giants merge and vanish? Once upon a time, mobile phone meant Nokia, computer meant Microsoft. In the 2010s, while Apple and Android were conquering the world, these two old giants decided to combine their powers. Microsoft bought Nokia's phone division for exactly $7.2 billion. The goal was to create the third major ecosystem. It looked perfect on paper, Nokia's great hardware and Microsoft's software power. But in practice, things turned into a disaster. The Windows Phone operating system was late and the App Store was empty. Popular apps like Instagram or YouTube arrived months, years later. What should people do with a great phone that has no apps? Microsoft completely crushed the Nokia culture, laid off thousands of employees, and eventually wrote off the entire $7.2 billion investment as a loss. This adventure not only wiped out money, but also the once legendary Nokia brand from the mobile world. As a former Google executive said, "You can't create an eagle by tying two turkeys together." 11. Theranos. The $9 billion bloody lie. Other items on this list are stories of failure. Theranos is a crime story. A young woman named Elizabeth Holmes captivated the world with her black turtlenecks and demeanor resembling Steve Jobs. Her claim was this: a small device they named Edison could diagnose hundreds of different diseases with a single drop of blood taken from your finger. An end to the fear of needles, a cheap and fast health revolution. The story was so beautiful that no one asked, does this technology actually work? America's oldest and most wolfish politicians and giant investors showered money on the company. Theranos' value reached $9 billion. But there was a small problem. The device didn't work. Holmes was deceiving investors and patients, secretly running blood tests on Siemens standard machines. When the bubble burst, the $9 billion value went to zero. Elizabeth Holmes is currently in prison. Theranos reminded us of the saying, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't, with a $9 billion lesson. 12. Apple Project Titan, the $10 billion bill for the non-existent car. The world's richest company, Apple, was looking for its next big revolution after the iPhone and thought it found the answer: a fully autonomous, steering wheel-free, pedal-free electric car. Codename Project Titan. For this secret project that started in 2014, Apple transferred thousands of engineers from Tesla and Mercedes. Everyone in Silicon Valley was waiting for the day Apple car would hit the roads. Expectations were so high that it was even rumored the car's wheels would be spherical. Apple struggled for exactly 10 years for this dream and is estimated to have spent more than $10 billion. The result? A massive nothing. The project drowned in management fights, technical difficulties, and indecision. In early 2024, Apple announced that it had completely canceled the project. $10 billion evaporated without even a single prototype being produced. Even if you are Apple, sometimes you cannot abide by the laws of physics and complex manufacturing processes with money. 13. Concorde, engineering marvel, economic disaster. Concorde was one of humanity's greatest achievements in the sky. It could go twice the speed of sound, traveling from London to New York in just 3 hours. Because it flew faster than the sun, your arrival time would be earlier than your departure time. However, this white swan was an economic nightmare. The British and French governments spent more than $20 billion in today's money to develop it. The problem was, Concorde consumed an incredible amount of fuel. Its 4 engines used as much energy at takeoff as a city's electricity. Also, the sonic boom created when it exceeded the speed of sound was so loud that it was banned from flying over land. This limited its routes only to oceans. Since ticket prices reached tens of thousands of dollars, only the super rich could fly. With the tragic accident in the year 2000 and the subsequent 9/11 crisis, the plug was pulled on Concorde. It was fast, it was beautiful, but it was unsustainable. It showed us that the price of speed is not always affordable. 14. Google Glass, the unwanted camera on our face. In 2012, Google introduced Google Glass with a flashy show featuring models skydiving. These smart glasses would bring the internet right before our eyes. We said, the future has arrived. But what Google didn't calculate was the social acceptance factor. The camera on the glasses had the potential to record constantly. People felt like they were being watched when talking to someone wearing Google Glass. Fights broke out in bars and cafes, and they were banned from entering cinemas. Even the derogatory nickname "glasshole" was coined in English for those wearing these glasses. Also, the device was $1,500. Its battery died immediately, and its design made a person look like a cyborg. Consumers did not want to sacrifice their privacy and style for this technology. Google quietly shelved the project. Glass became an expensive experiment, proving that technology being doable is not enough. It also needs to be humane. 15. 3D televisions, the glasses torture in our living room. When the movie Avatar was released in cinemas, the world was enchanted. Tech giants Samsung, Sony, LG, and Panasonic decided to bring this magic into our homes. Billions of dollars were invested in R&D. Factories were established. Everyone said, "This is the TV of the future. Everything will be 3D from now on." Consumers believed this and bought 3D TVs. However, shortly after, the 3D feature of those televisions started not being used at all. Why? Because people didn't want to wear those bulky, battery-powered, headache-inducing glasses while relaxing on their sofas at home. Also, there was no proper 3D content to watch. Watching news or series with glasses had turned into torture. The consumer wanted image quality, not an optical illusion. The industry had to accept this mistake, and since 2016, almost no television has included a 3D feature. The multi-billion-dollar industry went into the trash quietly. Take a deep breath, because the millions and billions you have heard so far will seem like mere pocket change compared to what you are about to hear. Up to this point, we discussed expensive corporate mistakes. However, the ones at the top of this list are more than just errors. They are global hallucinations, a mass eclipse of reason. Now, we are entering the league of heavy hitters, where not billions but trillions are discussed, and dreams crash from the greatest heights. 16th, the NFT craze, the $40 billion digital illusion. In 2021, the world entered a strange hysteria. People were paying millions of dollars for pictures of monkeys, pixelated characters, and even invisible artworks on the internet. They called it NFT and claimed it was the future of art and ownership. A great war began between those who asked, "Why pay the price of a house for a picture I can just right-click and save?" And those who said, "You don't understand technology. This is the title deed of the future." The market volume suddenly exceeded $40 billion. Celebrities, soccer players, and business people replaced their profile pictures with million-dollar monkeys. However, this was a classic tulip mania. Everyone thought they could sell the worthless digital file in their hands to a greater fool for a higher price. When the music stopped, there were no chairs left. As of 2023, 95% of the NFT market has collapsed. The value of that famous NFT Justin Bieber bought for $1.3 million dropped below $60,000. Millions of people were left with worthless digital wallets. $40 billion evaporated for the sake of a bunch of JPEG files. 17th, WeWork. The $47 billion party is over. Adam Neumann. With his long hair, charismatic speeches, and barefoot walks, he resembled a cult leader more than a CEO. The company he founded, WeWork, actually did a very simple job. It rented large buildings, divided them up, put in nice furniture and free beer taps, and rented desks to freelancers. In other words, standard real estate. However, Neumann convinced investors that this was a technology company that would raise the world's consciousness. The Japanese giant SoftBank fell in love with this vision and poured in billions of dollars in cash. The company's value reached $47 billion on paper. However, behind the scenes, the company was spending $2 for every dollar it earned. Neumann was buying private jets with company money, throwing parties, and living in insane luxury. When the company wanted to go public, the horror of the financial statements was revealed. This was not a tech giant, it was a realtor drowning in debt. The valuation collapsed in weeks, Neumann was fired, and WeWork came to the brink of bankruptcy. That massive $47 billion bubble burst with a single pinprick. 18th, Metaverse, Mark Zuckerberg's $50 billion gamble. In 2021, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg found the internet boring and changed the company's name to Meta. His goal was to build a virtual universe, the metaverse, where we would all live, work, and socialize. According to Zuckerberg, our physical homes in the future would only be for sleeping. Our real lives would be inside those headsets. Meta established the Reality Labs unit, burning more than $10 billion every year for this cause. The total loss exceeded $50 billion. Across the industry, the money spent reached $100 billion. So what was the result? Avatars that looked like arcade games from the 90s without even legs, and desolate virtual streets with no one in them. People refused to put a heavy plastic helmet on their heads and sit in a virtual meeting room. When the artificial intelligence revolution began, the metaverse quietly fell off the agenda. $50 billion was spent to build a ghost town where no one wanted to live. 19th, full self-driving, the $100 billion future that never arrives. In 2015, automotive and technology giants gave us a promise. We will let go of the steering wheel in 2020. Cars will take us to work while we sleep, and traffic accidents will end. Uber, Google, Tesla, Apple, Ford. Everyone entered this race. More than $100 billion was spent across the industry to develop autonomous driving technology. Uber's autonomous unit alone burned billions. However, engineers realized a bitter truth. It was easy to code the car to go straight on the highway, but almost impossible to code it to deal with chaotic city traffic, pedestrians not following rules, and surprises. They solved 99% of it, but that remaining 1%, which is real life, defeated the technology. Today, we are still behind the wheel. Robotaxis are only trying to crawl in very limited areas at very slow speeds. $100 billion was not enough to empty the driver's seat. 20th, the dot-com bubble, the trillion-dollar original sin of the internet age. At the top of our list is the biggest tech crash of all time, the dot-com bubble of the year 2000. In the late 90s, the internet was just becoming widespread and investors had lost their minds. It didn't matter what a company did or if it made a profit. Having .com at the end of its name was enough for its stock to skyrocket. Companies like Pets.com reached valuations of hundreds of millions of dollars without making a single cent of profit. People sold their houses to buy tech stocks. Everyone believed the rules of the new economy were different. But the law of gravity was unforgiving. In March of 2000, the bubble burst. The Nasdaq Stock Exchange lost 78% of its value. Even giants like Amazon and Cisco lost a huge portion of their value, while thousands of companies vanished completely. It is estimated that a total of nearly $5 trillion in wealth evaporated in this crash. This was the greatest price paid for humanity's blind faith in technology. The internet changed the world, yes, but the road to it passed over $1 trillion wreckage. From Juicero to the dot-com bubble, from Theranos sucking the blood of employees to flying cars that never existed. Today, we witnessed how trillions of dollars, intelligence, and labor went to waste. These stories show us this: progress is not a straight line. As humanity, while building the future, we sometimes get carried away by dreams, sometimes succumb to our hubris, and sometimes just become victims of our greed. These massive wrecks are not just financial losses, they are also expensive tuition fees we pay to understand what is possible and what is just an illusion. Perhaps the greatest technology is the ability to keep one's feet firmly on the ground while pushing the limits of the human mind. Those who pursue truth and utility, not money and popularity, win in the end. Yes, we have come to the end of another video. See you in another video. Take care of yourselves. I love you all.